Greg and I met in college. We were both music majors, and we sat right next to each other. And we just started hanging out. We had a lot in common. We also lived in the same dorm building, so we had a really good connection from the start, which grew. And I remember the first time I took him home. I know I'm going to get emotional, sorry. To meet my family. It was, I was very nervous because I did not have a great relationship with my parents in the first place. And the first time, I didn't tell them that we were dating at first. And, but he came in and dropped me off, and then he was going back to his home. And at first they were like, oh, what a nice young man. He's great. And then the next day I decided to try and tell them that we were dating. And they just basically told me how I was ruining my life. And it became very difficult. And I was really forced to choose between Greg and my family. And for a while we were dating, Greg would pick me up at my house, and he could tell if it was really bad at my parents' house if I was sitting out on the curb waiting for him, because my dad stopped speaking to me. And it was just a very difficult situation. He wasn't overtly saying anything racial, but it was very obvious that I was ruining my life if I decided to stay with Greg. And for a while, I decided it wasn't worth it. My family life was chaos, and we had broken up for a while, and I was just miserable. So I knew when I was choosing to marry Greg that I was either choosing Greg or my family. So I chose Greg, obviously, and for 13 years, my dad wouldn't speak to me. He didn't meet any of my kids until my daughter was 13. And
I disowned you, actually.
Yeah, it was hard. Now, after that, we had a chance to make up, and where my father and Greg had a chance to talk very heatedly on the golf course about the whole situation, and Greg ended up actually being closer to my dad than I ever was. And there were hard times. I mean, I know my dad was trying to protect me. He knew what kind of society we lived in, and he knew it wasn't going to be easy, especially in a mixed marriage, because it can give people on both sides a hard time. So he knew, I mean, he was right about that. But once he actually got to know Greg and give him a chance, he fell in love with what I fell in love with too.
Yeah, yeah. And it's actually pretty interesting because my family was, my grandmother was a sharecropper. And I just remember as a little boy sitting at her feet and, stories she would tell me about, being on a, working on a plantation or what have you. And I just really I idolized my grandmother, but she was a super strong woman. And when we were dating, she was the one I feared the most of introducing Anna Marie to because of my own preconceived notion of what she went through in the Deep South as a sharecropper. She literally gave birth to my dad. She came in from the field, gave birth to my dad. They kept my dad in the home. They wrapped her bottom in burlap, and she went back out to finish her chores or what she was doing as a sharecropper. So knowing these stories, there was a part of me that was deathly afraid to share who Anna Marie was. And so, unfortunately, I did my grandmother last. And I should have done her first, because her question to me was, do you love her? I said, Granny, yes, I do. She goes, doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. And then she fell in love with Anna Marie, because in my house, you were liked or disliked around how much food you ate, and Anna Marie got seconds of my grandmother's food, so she literally fell in love with her right then and there. She goes, man, that girl can go. I like her. She's not like any of those other sticks you brought around to the house. So there was a silver lining to that, but it was tough, the first 13 years, because it was us having the joy of raising our family. My dad and my mom and other family members on my side were around, but it was really difficult because there was that element missing from Anna Marie's side of the family, and we never told the kids why, because we firmly believe that through prayer it would be seen through, and I remember. Uncle Ernie and 3 of Anna Marie's aunts came to our wedding, and I believe Anna Marie's twin brother walked Anna Marie down the aisle, and Uncle Ernie was every bit of 6'8", 6'9", big guy, very strong believer, and he came up to me and he hugged me. And he just whispered in my ear, and he said, I've been praying since Anna Marie was a baby that she would marry a man of God. And that, to me, right there, even though I had to walk through the hurt and try to help Anna Marie walk through the hurt, that right there did it for me. Once Uncle Ernie told me that, I was good to go, and didn't really worry about it too much, again, other than the impact that it had on Anna Marie. And her family, older, they were getting together for a family reunion, and we made the suggestion. I made the suggestion to Anna Marie. I said, well, why don't you check with your mother, see if you can go. I don't need to go to the house. I can hang out at the pool, at the hotel with the kids. We can find stuff to do. There's parks, there's nature trails and all that from what we had seen, while you go visit with your family. And which her family accepted, and that was fine. And I'm probably recalling the time frame differently. I felt like it was either the day before we left, or it might have even been on the car ride to Tennessee, where I think it was on the car ride to Tennessee, Anna Marie called her mom and said, hey, we're going to be arriving about this time. And she said, and I talked to your dad, Greg's welcome to come to the house. Well, of course, now I'm put on the spot because I'm going, yeah, I don't know that I want to go, only from the standpoint of I want to be respectful, and if I'm going to be disrespected, I don't know how well I can hold my temper if something untoward or something like that is said. And again, you got to remember, the kids knew nothing about, what was going on with the relationship, or what wasn't going on with the relationship with their parents. And so we pull into the driveway of their home, and literally before I could get the minivan in park, Chelsea had already had her seatbelt off, slammed open the sliding door, and just went barreling up to the front door. And my father-in-law opened the door, and he saw Chelsea, and he just burst out in tears. And it was the realization of what he had missed. He literally laid eyes on Chelsea and just wept like a baby and held her, and it seemed like all was good. And we went into the house. He met the rest of the kids and the aunts and the uncles and all of that. And Dad, I called him, said, "Do you play golf?" I said, "Well, I play at it," because they live on a golf course. And said, well, we're going to go play golf tomorrow. I said, okay, that works for me. I have to rent clubs. Obviously, I didn't bring clubs down or anything like that. And the first 7, 8 holes was a man-to-man or adult-to-adult conversation. It was good. No one yelled or screamed. It was very frank and very matter-of-fact. By the time we got to about the maybe 11th hole, he had turned and said, I have to admit, you're the only man who's stood up to me. And I really respect you for that. And when I had gone to the house to ask for Anna Marie's hand in marriage, kind of to go back a little bit, I had gone to the house and told what our plans were, that we wanted to get engaged, and I wanted to ask for her hand in marriage, but I wanted his approval because that was the way I was raised. And I remember him turning to me and he said, well, you're going to do what you want to do anyway, so what does it matter if you get my permission? I said, well, because you'll never have the opportunity to say that I didn't come to you as a man respectfully to ask for your daughter's hand. You're right, we're going to get married, but I want to give you the opportunity. And by the 11th hole, he said that had haunted him the entire time, and it was really just he couldn't get past his ego and he had done extremely well in corporate America, and was the president of this and CEO of that, so he was used to literally just people doing whatever he said without question. Unfortunately, I think he kind of raised his kids a little bit that way too, that kind of relationship. But to Anna Marie's point, we ended up becoming the best of friends. We really and truly did in a very short time.
But raising a mixed family is different too.
Yeah.
Just because it angers people on both sides sometimes, because I've been told that I'm stealing one of the good ones, and I kind of did. He is a good one. We started dating around the time that Spike Lee's Jungle Fever came out. And so basically the concept behind that is just that white women would date black men because of their prowess or whatever they want to say.
Stereotypes.
And that was what was going on. So that was the stereotype when we were dating. And it was hard for anyone to imagine that we actually loved each other. It was either because I was attractive, or it couldn't possibly that a black man and a white woman actually had something in common and loved each other. I had friends that would tell me, you're not going to have blue-eyed kids, and you're pretty. Why do you like, as if I could do better, and so saying things like that, they're thinking they're helping me, and I'm just like, that's not really helpful,
And it, it's interesting because I fully know that I'm black, and I am extremely proud of my lineage and my heritage, and I've been raised to look at it, even when you talk about the sin of slavery, right? My perspective of that is a bit different in that I look at it from a place of honor, in that 400 years of trying to essentially exterminate a people group, and here I stand. That God's plan was the best plan. So, even when we kind of talk through that piece, it was terrible, and to say it was terrible was a significantly gross understatement, but I take it from the standpoint of pride because of what my ancestors went through and how much strength that instills in me when I have hardships. And my dad, obviously raised born on a plantation and raised in the Deep South. He had the water hoses and water cannons put on him. He had the police dogs put on him. He remembers, the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan coming through and doing their damage. In fact, he has a gold coin that he had gotten from a Klansman. He'll never share the story of how he got it, but it's a member. It says on that, and it's stamped out. It says member of the Royal Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, member in good standing. And he always kept that in his top drawer. So having had a dad that has gone through those kinds of experiences, he raised me in a way that his words were, even if they burn a cross on your front lawn, you're a dandy and you better not ever blame it on race. Don't raise your voice or your hands, better your argument. And so I'm probably, a different side of the spectrum there, in that, experiences. Have I had experiences where I know it's because of race? Absolutely. But I had that ingrained in me of, don't you blame it on that. You find a way to better your argument. And I was sharing with some of the youth the other day, and again, there have been experiences where, even here locally in central Pennsylvania, where, in a particular town, weekly, I would get stopped by the same police officer for being dressed up, driving what I thought was a nice car. Evidently, they thought it was a nice car too, because they only stopped me when I was driving that car. And had challenges like that. Again, I don't blame it on race, but I did call it out the last time, because unbeknownst to the officer, the mayor of the town was a mentor of mine, and I always called him Dad and honored him on Father's Day and his wife on Mother's Day for years. And I remember saying to him, I've got the mayor number on speed dial right here. I can give him a call, because I think you and I both know why you continue to pull me over. There's nothing wrong with the tail light. There's nothing wrong with the brake light. I believe your issue is, I'm a black man dressed up in a nice car driving through this neighborhood, which evidently I don't belong. And I called the mayor. He straightened it all out. And it turned out that this police officer was just a jerk to everybody, particularly women and to men of color. Sorry, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say there were some overt things too.
Yeah.
I remember when Chelsea was maybe 3 or 4 and Jordan was a baby, and we were at a friend's house in another locality, and we were there quite frequently because her son was the same age as Chelsea. We were very close friends.
Oh, yeah.
We would go back and forth, and then our friend had painted on her car and lover shortly after we left one day. So something's overt as well.
Yeah. Back in the mid to later 2000s, I had an office in the Carolinas, in North Carolina, and we had a corporate event. I traveled a lot. I had like 6 or 7 states that I was responsible for from sales and IT engineering perspective. And we had a big technology expedition at a golf resort, and I won't say the name of it. And I was the keynote speaker. So we had probably 80, maybe 100 customers, prospects, suspects of that nature come to the technology show and to come to hear me speak, because I was considered a subject matter expert on what I was there to talk about. So I gave the presentation, went really well. After the presentation, got a chance to meet a lot of people and talk to people and, address more questions and concerns, things of that nature. And then after that, the goal was we were going to play golf, and we had paid for golfing and the facility and all that sorts of stuff. And again, it was a very, very, very high end. So I go to the rental car and I get my golf clothes on and I, come out. And the manager's, sir, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm just want to know what foursome I'm in to play golf. Well, sir, you're not playing golf. Oh no, yeah. Slow me. I'm like, oh no, I'm absolutely gonna play golf. They sent out the questionnaire, this, that, or the other thing, and I'm gonna be playing golf. Just need to know what foursome. Sir, no, you're not going to be playing golf. And after about the third or fourth time, it hit me. Now again, we're talking late 2000s. They didn't allow people of color to play golf on their golf course. So when it did hit me, I excused myself, I went to the men's room, and I literally sat in the stall and I cried like a baby. Like I hadn't cried like that probably since I was a baby, because it was absolutely overt. It was in front of colleagues, business partners, and I remember saying to the Lord, can this really be happening to me? Like, this is not the 40s or the 50s. It's like 2008, 2009. This is, you've got to be kidding me. This can't be happening. So after a couple minutes, about 10 minutes, I pulled myself together, and then just kind of this, I guess, righteous indignation rose up in me, and went back out and called for it was the GM, the general manager, and I said, well, let me help you understand something. I'm going to play golf, so if you can get my clubs, tell me what foursome I'm in, I'm going to play golf. We just wrote you a check for, it might have been like $15,000, $20,000 for what we were doing that day. I said, and if you insist that I don't play golf, the name of this golf course will probably change next week to the Gregory Allen Dandy Golf Resort. Do I make myself clear? And there was shuffling and this, that, and the other thing. I had to wait maybe another 15, 20 minutes, but I played golf. But the cool thing about it, there were a number of people with my company that were members of the golf resort, and a number of customers. At the end of the golf game, they all terminated their membership to the golf course. And some of them, this was, they were like the second generation or the third generation to inherit a membership to this prestigious club. And they were like, no, we're done. So that was, there have been some times, but
being a parent, I think, brings up other issues too, because you want your kids to be respectful, you want them to grow up the right way, you want them not to be fearful of anything, and I remember we had just got done reading, I homeschooled the kids, To Kill a Mockingbird, and that was the first time they had heard the N-word, and so I had to explain what that was in context of that. And then we visited a church. We were going to a different church at the time, and we were there. And at church, the first time my kids were called the N-word was by some kids there. And we had just maybe 2 weeks before put it in context.
Yeah.
And it was jarring for everybody.
And because there's, as a dad, as a man, there are things that I instill in my children, and especially my boys, of, make sure you're not hanging around somebody that's doing something stupid or illegal and that's going to draw attention to you. Be careful, because, if you're with people of bad character, that corrupts you. And just other rules of, even with my daughter, and I think she just posted something on Facebook, you're going into the mall, don't have a big open person, so on and so forth, and, just being sneaky types of things because you're going to attract more attention than probably someone else. And I had to be careful because I didn't want to ingrain in my children that they had to act a certain way or had to act a certain way because of their color, because we still demanded excellence from them. It was a challenge at times because I wanted to make sure that they weren't getting this duplicitous message. Because quite frankly, and I was talking to Pastor Tave about this, it's good advice for any kid, but there are other considerations that my kids are going to have to take heed to make sure they stay safe. That's really, the bottom line. And that was a bit of a challenge, but we've been blessed to have them turn out the way they have, and it's very interesting. The boys that called my kids the N-word were boys that they were friends with for years. They weren't like they had just met them, and my boys were upset, and I was upset, and I called the boys' dad. I was like, "Look, we got a problem. We need to iron this out. If this is gonna, go any further, they're going to be friends, and there's going to be sleepovers and camping trips and all that. You and I need to iron this out." And the dad was like, "Well, no, he gets it. They're getting it from their older brother, and then we knew the older brother." I'm going, "Yeah, no, that's not that's not ringing true." So, we prayed as a family. They were able to work it out, and we're just like, "Lord, whoever that is, in their family, Lord, that you would just come, you would bring people of color around whoever they are to show them a different way, so on and so forth." And the boys were Jordan's 26, he was maybe 7, 8 years old. And I tell you the goodness of God. 2 years ago, we never found out who the family member was. About a year and a half ago, maybe, we were in church. A gentleman comes up to me, and he's talking to me, and struggled with race. And to his words, he was a racist. Didn't want to be that anymore. And shared his story with me of what happened to him as a little boy. And I got it, and totally understood it, because I just took the time to listen to his heart. No preconceived notion, but let me hear this person's heart. I ended up praying for him. And afterwards, we ended up talking more and more. Here, 20 years later, that was the family member. Mm-hmm. Unbeknownst to me. Mm-hmm. And we began to talk about how who his family was and where he's from. Like, your grandkids were my boy's best friends at the time, so show you the faithfulness of God. Mm-hmm. That was him, and I was the one that God chose to pray for him, to get him to walk out of those extreme prejudices, and we hug to this day. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. I know you have to leave in a couple of minutes. It's 5:02. Mm-hmm. Is there anything you want to say? It could be about racism in general. It could be what you would like to see happen. It could be anything.
Yeah.
Just quick, or anything that you want to say to to anybody watching the video?
Yeah, so for, for me, when people talk about racism, like, I get it, right? I believe we mislabel it. I feel like the Lord has shown me years ago, it's a human heart issue. Racism is just the outgrowth of it. It's a heart issue. It's not a black-white issue. It's a heart issue. And I believe if we are honest with ourselves, if you're honest with yourself, you will begin to see where you may have those heart issues towards other people groups or towards, all sorts of other things. Whereas when we address the heart issue, the byproduct, one of them, racism, goes down. And one of the things that I've always tried to do, and I do even more now, just listen. Just sit and listen to someone's heart and get a chance to understand where they are coming from. In each instance when I've done that, I totally understood why they had the perception or the perspective that they had, because I took the time to hear them and put away my biases or my anger for what they said or for what they did. When I heard them, like, you know what? I get it. When I, would talk with my father-in-law and he told his story, I'm like, I totally get that. I'm 6'4", 250, black. I'd feel the same way you do, Dad, if that were my story. So let's talk about that. Finding that ground and then neutralizing it with love.
I think one of the biggest things we can do to combat that is to just get out of your comfort zone and to have those difficult, uncomfortable conversations and to ask people about their experiences, or why do you believe that? Why do you think like that? And to go levels down from the I'm sitting next to you in the pew, hi, how you doing? We've got to be willing to build relationships with people that think differently than we do, that you're not necessarily the gravitated to naturally, but just to be willing to get to know someone who looks different than you, who thinks different than you, that may be from a different socioeconomic background, that has come up completely different than you, and to just talk and get to know them. And I think that brings so much healing. It brings so much understanding, where then you gain that compassion, you gain that empathy, and the relationships can develop further as well.